Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about with pediatrics is immunizations, and I'm not going to have you memorize the immunization schedule. What I want you to understand are what are some of the risks. First, how do immunizations work, and then what are some of the risks and when we might see contraindications. So first of all, let's look at the types of immunity. Okay, so we can have either native immunity to something or acquired immunity. Native immunity is something we're just born with, and it tends to be just a genetic fluke. Acquired immunity is when we're not born immune to a disease and we develop it somehow. Okay, so we can develop acquired immunity either actively or passively. Actively means we made our own antibodies to that. Passively means we got someone else's antibodies to that or artificial ones. Okay, so active or passive. Active, we make our own antibodies. Passive, we get other antibodies. So let's look at passive first. We can get passive antibodies either naturally or artificially. Naturally, there are two ways that can come through the placenta or by breastfeeding. The mother passes antibodies to the fetus via the placenta and through the infant via breastfeeding. Okay. Now, we can also be injected with artificial antibodies, and we see that given sometimes for patients who are extremely at risk. We actually that's what we do for some very serious diseases like rabies. We also will see this with Hep B. We can give artificial antibodies to someone exposed to Hep B. So artificial is we're giving antibodies to that person. The thing about artificial antibodies or artificially introduced antibodies, even if they're produced somewhere else, is if we're not making our own and we just put some into someone's body, they eventually go away. They don't last forever. So passive immunity is temporary. Now, active immunity is when we make our own antibodies. Natural active immunity is when we've been exposed to the antibody. Okay. I've got chickenpox. I recover from chickenpox. I now have natural immunity to chickenpox. Okay. Artificial immunity is when artificial active immunity is when we're injected with a substance that causes us to make antibodies to that organism. So that could be a live organism that's been weakened. That's called live attenuated. That can be a dead organism or specific parts of organisms, or that can be a toxin. And we make antibodies against that, and that protects us from disease. So when we're talking about vaccines, here's where we are on this chart. Okay, you need to know the difference between live virus vaccines and dead vaccines or inactive. So a live virus vaccine, that virus has been weakened, but it is still live, and someone who's immunocompromised is at greater risk for developing the infection. There's a small risk of anyone developing the infection from that live virus vaccine, but it's pretty small as long as it's a weakened live virus. So someone who is immunocompromised, someone who is pregnant, it's contraindicated for them to receive a live virus vaccine. So which ones are live? It's easier to remember the ones that are live, and everything else is dead. Influenza, the nasal mist only is live, and it's actually off the market right now. But if it ever comes back, the flu mist that was used in the past is live virus. Flu shots are not. It is not possible to get the flu from a flu shot. Okay. The MMR is a live virus. Rotavirus is live. Varicella. Smallpox, and smallpox is a higher risk vaccine, so it's not usually given routinely. It's given only if there's actually a risk of someone coming in contact with smallpox. And the oral polio vaccine, which is not typically given in the US anymore. It's given in some developing countries. So everything else is dead. It cannot give you the disease. So polio, the injected polio vaccine is not a live virus. It's not It cannot give you polio. Okay. Flu shot can't give you the flu. All right. So one of the things we've got to look at are the live virus vaccines. So you need to know those. Those are contraindicated to anyone who's immunocompromised. They're contraindicated for pregnant people. Okay. Some vaccines have allergy risk, and a previous allergic reaction to a vaccine or any component. If that vaccine is going to be administered again, the decision needs to be made based on how worried we are about the illness compared to how serious that reaction was, and it should be administered. If it's considered necessary, it should be administered in a setting where emergency treatment is available. An immune response to vaccines are common and expected. That can include soreness, swelling, redness, fever, and some mild symptoms. Now, a lot of people with the Tdap is one that a lot of people have a pretty strong immune response to. A lot of people have a really strong immune response to especially the spike protein vaccines for COVID. So immune response is expected, but that's not the same as an adverse response or an allergy. Some other potential contraindications. MMR and most influenza vaccines are developed using egg. So they, if someone has an anaphylactic egg allergy, that they might be either contraindicated or they may need to receive that vaccine in a controlled environment. Now, the quadrivalent flu vaccine, Flublok, is not, and it is egg-free and safe for egg allergies. Dtap or DTP, if someone has a history of encephalopathy, seizure, or inconsolable crying after a previous dose, they should not receive another dose. That's considered an adverse reaction. Injectable polio, if someone is allergic to neomycin or streptomycin and they're anaphylactic to those, injectable polio is contraindicated, or is a risk. They need to be, there's a risk of cross reaction. Hep B and HPV vaccines, if someone has an anaphylactic reaction to Baker's yeast, that's a potential cross reactor. Varicella, if they have a severe allergic reaction to neomycin or gelatin, that's a potential cross reaction. Live flu vaccine should not be taken by anyone who's taking salicylates or who has a history of Guillain-Barré syndrome. And meningococcal vaccine is a potential, if they have a history of Guillain-Barré syndrome, meningococcal vaccine is usually contraindicated. Okay, that's the end of your lectures for this semester. I'm looking forward to the end of the semester and seeing you progress.